The wind came off the ocean low and steady, carrying a smell I recognized immediately. Salt, rust, and something older, like wet stone that had not seen the sun in decades. I stood at the edge of the cliff with the lighthouse below me, its white paint long since peeled away, its windows blackened like empty eye sockets. Even before I stepped closer, I felt the familiar pressure in my chest. Not fear exactly, more like the sense that something had already noticed me. I had learned over years of exploring abandoned places to trust that feeling. It usually arrived before anything else went wrong. But that wasn't the strangest part. The lighthouse had been officially decommissioned in the late 1980s after satellite navigation made coastal signalmen obsolete. On paper, it was empty. No power, no staff, no radio traffic assigned to its call sign. And yet, fishermen along this stretch of coast still told the same story in low voices, usually after sunset. Sometimes, when the fog rolled in thick and the sea went quiet, the old lighthouse answered the radio. Not a broadcast, not static, a response. I didn't come here on impulse. I never do. One of the 4 survival rules, always conduct reconnaissance, exists for a reason. Weeks before this trip, I listened to archived maritime logs, spoke with retired Coast Guard operators, and compared reports that spanned decades. The details never lined up perfectly, but the pattern did. Same frequency, same clipped tone, same insistence that the signal was still active. Still active. Those words stayed with me as I made my way down the narrow path toward the structure. The gravel crunched under my boots, loud in the evening stillness. The sun was already sinking, bleeding orange into the water, and I knew I was running out of natural light. That was another risk, but I hadn't broken the rules yet. I had permission. Not from an authority, at least not in the way most people think. The agency that once owned the lighthouse no longer existed. The land had reverted to the coast, unclaimed and unmanaged. But I had done something else. Something I always did before entering places like this. I stood still, placed my hand against the cold metal gate, and spoke out loud. "I'm only here to observe," I said quietly. "I'll take nothing. I'll leave everything as it is." The words felt foolish, hanging in the air. But experience had taught me that abandoned places had their own rules, older than paperwork. Ignoring them was how people disappeared. The gate was unlocked. Inside, the lighthouse smelled of mold, oil, and something faintly electrical, even though there shouldn't have been any power left. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing spiral stairs hugging the inner wall, their iron rails slick with moisture. Somewhere above me, the wind pushed through broken panes, producing a low, rhythmic moan that rose and fell like breathing. I paused at the base of the stairs. Never go alone was the 3rd rule, and technically, I wasn't. A colleague waited in a vehicle parked beyond the ridge, monitoring emergency channels. If something went wrong, I wouldn't be completely unheard. That mattered more than most people realize. I started climbing. Each step echoed, the sound traveling upward and coming back to me delayed, distorted. Halfway up, I noticed something that made me stop. Carved into the inner wall, just above shoulder height, were markings, not graffiti. They were deliberate. Short lines, symbols I didn't recognize, repeated again and again as the stairs ascended. They weren't there in the historical photographs. I ran my fingers over one of them. The grooves were shallow but sharp, as if cut recently. That didn't make sense. The lighthouse hadn't seen maintenance crews in decades. And yet, the dust around the markings was undisturbed, as though they had always been part of the structure. That's when my radio crackled. At first, it was just static, the familiar hiss of an open channel. I checked the frequency. It was one I used to stay in contact with my colleague. There shouldn't have been interference here. I raised the radio closer to my ear, listening carefully. Then a voice came through. Signal acknowledged. The words were faint, clipped, and strangely formal. Male, but flattened, as if filtered through old equipment. I froze, every muscle tightening at once. My colleague hadn't spoken, I was sure of it, and the voice hadn't used my call sign. "Who's transmitting?" I asked, keeping my own voice steady. There was a pause. Long enough that I wondered if I had imagined the response. Then the radio spoke again. "Station is operational. State your intent." My mouth went dry. This wasn't a random broadcast. It wasn't a fragment of recorded audio looping in the system. It was responding to me, directly. "I'm here to document," I said finally. "No interference." Another pause. The wind outside seemed to die down, leaving an unnatural silence that pressed in on my ears. Even the lighthouse's groaning stopped, as if the building itself was listening. "Intent noted," the voice said. "Maintain protocol." Protocol. The word sent a chill through me. Because there was no protocol anymore. The lighthouse's operating manuals had been archived, their procedures obsolete. And yet, whatever was answering me still believed they applied. I continued upward, more slowly now, counting each step, listening for any change in the radio's static. The symbols along the wall grew denser near the top, overlapping in places as if whoever carved them had been in a hurry. Or afraid. At the lantern room, the door stood ajar. Cold air poured out, carrying the unmistakable scent of ozone. Inside, the great lens assembly sat dark and lifeless, its glass panes coated in grime. But beneath the dirt, I could see faint reflections, as though light had passed through it recently. I didn't touch anything. The second rule, take nothing but photos, also meant leaving no fingerprints where possible. Instead, I raised my camera, documenting every angle, every detail. As I worked, the radio remained silent, too silent. Then, just as I lowered the camera, the voice returned, softer this time. "Visibility reduced," it said. "Fog incoming." I turned toward the windows. Outside, the horizon had vanished. A dense white wall rolled in from the sea, swallowing the cliff, the path, the world beyond the lighthouse. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. And that was when I realized something else. The voice hadn't warned me. It had reported conditions. Fog doesn't arrive like weather. Not out here. Not when you're standing inside a dead lighthouse that shouldn't be speaking to you through a radio, that shouldn't be receiving anything at all. Fog arrives like a decision being made, slowly, deliberately, with no interest in whether you're ready. I watched it press against the glass, turning the lantern room windows into pale mirrors. My reflection floated back at me, flashlight glow on my face, camera strap across my chest, eyes too wide. Behind my reflection was only white. The radio crackled once, softly, like someone clearing their throat. I forced myself to breathe through my nose. Salt, ozone, old oil, the smell of a long abandoned machine that had no reason to be warm. Yet the metal under my hand, when I steadied myself against the rail, felt faintly alive, not hot. Just not as cold as it should have been. One of the survival rules is simple. Take nothing but photos. People think it's about respecting property, avoiding charges, being ethical. That's the surface. The deeper reason is this. Some places notice what you remove, and they respond. So I kept my hands to myself and focused on what I could control. I checked my watch. Then I checked it again, because the first look didn't feel real. The second hand moved, but there was a lag, like it hesitated between ticks. I walked a slow circle around the lantern room, flashlight beams sweeping across the lens assembly. The great Fresnel lens stood like a dead eye, its glass prisms layered and complicated. It was beautiful in a sad way. The kind of engineering built when people still believed light could save lives. I could imagine a signalman climbing these stairs night after night, checking the lamp, logging weather, listening to the sea. A solitary job that made loneliness official. And that was when I noticed the logbook. It sat on a small desk in the corner, swollen with moisture, its cover warped. It shouldn't have survived decades of abandonment, not in this damp air. And yet it was here, waiting, like it had always been part of the room. I didn't touch it right away. Permission, reconnaissance, never go alone. Take only photos. The 4 forbidden rules lived in my head like a mantra. I'd already asked permission at the gate. I'd done my reconnaissance. I wasn't truly alone, and I wasn't taking anything. But touching the logbook, that felt like crossing a different line, like turning a page in a story that might not want to be read. The radio spoke again, low and flat. Maintain protocol. I turned slowly, radio lifted near my mouth. Whose protocol? I asked. Static. A soft hiss that sounded almost like distant surf. Then, very faintly, station protocol. The simplest answer, delivered like an order. I swallowed, and I told myself something I always told myself in moments like this. Don't give the place more emotion than it deserves. Fear feeds attention. Curiosity invites participation. Calm, controlled observation keeps you small. I raised my camera instead, took photos of the desk, the logbook, the lens, the wall markings. Every shot was a way of keeping distance, proof without contact. But the fog outside thickened, and with it came a change in sound. The wind returned, but it didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded like it was pushing through a throat, making a long, wet whisper that slid around the glass. I stepped closer to a window, angling the flashlight outward. The beam hit the fog and died immediately, swallowed. No cliff, no sea, no path. Just a blank, endless white. My colleague's voice should have come through my radio by now, checking in. They knew the schedule. They knew I'd reached the top. But all I had was silence. I pressed the transmit button. Status check, I said. Do you copy? Nothing. I tried again, slower. I'm at the lantern room. Fog just rolled in. Confirm you're receiving. Still nothing. Then, softly, like the air itself was answering me, my radio hissed, and that same clipped male voice returned. Transmission interference detected. Maintain position. I stared at the radio in my hand. It wasn't just answering anymore. It was instructing. I should have left right then. The smart move, the safe move, would have been to retreat while I still knew where the stairs were. But the fog outside made leaving feel suddenly complicated, visibility reduced. That phrase echoed in my mind. Not a warning, a report. Like it didn't care whether I got out. I turned back to the desk. The logbook sat there, swollen and patient. If this lighthouse was operational, then its records mattered. If it still believed it had a duty, then it would have logged what was happening now. I leaned in, close enough to see without touching. The cover was stamped with faded lettering. Not fully readable, but I could make out a date range. 1959, 1963. That was a narrow window. Strange. Lighthouses keep logs continuously, year after year. Why was this one limited? I took a photo of the cover, then another of the spine. I adjusted the camera angle and zoomed, trying to capture the title. My fingers hovered near the edge of the cover, tempted. Behind me, the whispering wind shifted into something that sounded too much like words. Not clear words, but rhythm, cadence. I didn't turn around right away. I've learned that some sounds get sharper when you face them, like they want your attention, and looking directly is agreement. Instead, I spoke quietly, as if speaking to myself. "I'm not here to disturb," I said, voice low, "only to observe." The whispering stopped. I exhaled. My breath fogged the inside of my mask. Then the radio crackled with a single word, harder than before. "Record." I froze. "Record what?" I asked, instantly regretting it. The moment you ask a question, you open a door. Static. Then, weather? Signals? Contact. Contact. The word landed heavy in my stomach, because if there was contact, there was someone to contact. And if the lighthouse was still answering, then someone, or something, was listening. My gaze drifted to the far side of the lantern room. There was a narrow door there, half hidden behind the lens structure. It hadn't registered as important at first. But now, in the stillness, it looked like a boundary. A door that led away from the light, deeper into the building's old body. I walked toward it slowly. The floorboards creaked, damp and tired. The door was metal, painted once, but now pitted with rust. A small sign, bolted at eye level, read, "Radio Room." I felt the hairs on my arms rise. A lighthouse without a radio room is like a skull without ears. That was where the voice would come from, if it came from anywhere physical at all. I lifted my camera again, documenting the sign, the handle, the hinges. My hand hovered near the latch, and for a moment, my mind flashed through the rules again, like warning lights. Permission. Photos only. Don't go alone. Recon, I had permission to enter the lighthouse. But did that permission extend to opening doors inside it? That felt like a different request, one I hadn't made out loud. So I stopped, and I did the simplest thing. I asked, softly, quietly, to the air around me. "May I enter the radio room?" I said. Nothing answered. Not the wind, not the radio, not the building's groan. Then, so faint I almost missed it, the radio hissed, and the voice returned, stripped of emotion. "Authorized." My fingers closed around the latch. The metal was warmer than it should have been, and when I pulled the door open, the smell that spilled out wasn't mold or rust. It was hot dust and old electricity. The radio room was smaller than I expected, more like a cramped nerve center than a workspace. The ceiling sloped, pressing down close, and the air inside felt different. Thicker, stale in a way the rest of the lighthouse wasn't, as if this space had been sealed off from time. My flashlight beam found the equipment immediately. A console, 2 battered receivers, a microphone hanging from a hook, a wall-mounted speaker with a frayed cloth face, and, at the center, a radio set with dials that belonged to another era. Metal knobs, yellowed frequency markings, the kind you adjust with patience and muscle memory. None of it should have worked, but the smell, hot dust, faint ozone, was unmistakable. It was the smell of something powered. I didn't step fully inside at first. I stayed in the doorway, keeping the frame of the door at my back. I've learned to treat thresholds like they matter. Some places behave differently once you commit your whole body to the room. On the desk, next to the console, sat a mug, white ceramic, a faded logo I couldn't recognize. Inside was a hard ring of brown residue, coffee long evaporated. The mug was the detail that made my throat tighten, because it meant someone had been here long enough to drink something warm, not decades ago. Recently enough that the cup hadn't been knocked over, shattered, or buried under debris. Recently enough that it still looked placed. I raised my camera, took a series of photos, wide shot, mid shot, close shot. I wanted proof. I wanted something objective. Because my mind was starting to do that thing it always does in places like this, building explanations just to keep panic away. Maybe vandals, maybe a squatter, maybe someone from the nearby fishing village used the lighthouse as shelter. But that wasn't the strangest part. The radio set's indicator light was on, a small, dull amber glow, steady, not flickering, as if it had been powered for hours. My fingers went cold. I didn't touch the dials. I didn't touch the microphone. I just stared at that tiny light, trying to remember the exact wiring layout of old maritime radios. Most of them needed external power. Some could run on batteries, but not for decades, not without maintenance. I lifted my own handheld radio, held it closer to my face. "Is someone here?" I asked quietly. Not into the handheld, into the room. A soft hiss came from the wall speaker. Not my handheld. The speaker mounted above the desk. Then the clipped voice returned, but now it sounded closer, fuller. Less like it was traveling through distance. "Station operator present," it said. My chest tightened. "Who are you?" I asked. A pause. "Signalman on duty." The words were so matter-of-fact, so plain, that my mind almost accepted them. Like this was normal. Like it was 1961 and I'd stepped into a working station. I took one step inside, then stopped again, checking myself. Slow, steady, controlled, no acting, no dramatization, just reality as it happened. My flashlight beam shifted to the wall behind the console. A map was pinned there. Old nautical charts, corners curled, paper stained by damp. Handwritten notes marked certain points along the coast. Tide times, rock hazards. A few entries circled in red pencil. I leaned closer, careful not to brush the paper. One circled note caught my eye. "Calls after fog." The rest was smudged, unreadable. Calls after fog. I felt my pulse quicken. The radio room wasn't just abandoned, it was maintained. Not pristine, but cared for in the way a person cares for a job they do every day. There were stacked forms on the desk, a pencil in a shallow tray, a small hand-cranked generator near the floor. I hadn't seen the generator on reconnaissance photos, because there were no reconnaissance photos of this room. No one I spoke to had admitted to stepping inside it. They talked about the lighthouse from a distance, like it was a place you point at but never enter. My own handheld radio suddenly crackled, different from before. A burst of static, then my colleague's voice, strained and broken. "Are you... copy?" Relief surged through me. I pressed transmit immediately. "I copy," I said. "I'm inside. The lighthouse is interfering. I'm hearing transmissions." The response came back chopped, incomplete. "Get out, fog, can't see." Then the line died, and into the silence, the wall speaker spoke again, calm as a clock. "External communication compromised," it said. Maintain station protocol. I stared at the speaker. What is station protocol? I asked, forcing each word to come out even, controlled. The speaker hissed softly before replying. Log conditions. Respond to calls. Keep the light. Keep the light. I turned slowly toward the lantern room door behind me. The Fresnel lens had been dark when I arrived. No lamp, no beam. But the speaker said, keep the light as if it was already lit, or supposed to be. I moved back toward the lantern room. As I passed the threshold, I felt the shift in air again. Cooler, cleaner, less thick, like leaving a mouth and stepping back into open space. The lens assembly sat exactly where it had been, but something had changed. A faint glow shimmered inside the glass, not bright, not enough to cast a beam through the fog. Just a low, pale light, like moonlight trapped inside prisms. I stopped walking. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the damp boards under my boots. But under everything was another sound, a distant, repeating click, like a relay switch toggling on and off. It was coming from below, from somewhere deep inside the lighthouse. I stood still, listening. Click, click, click. Then, from the fog outside the windows came a new sound. 3 short bursts, followed by one long. It was faint, but unmistakable. A distress pattern. Someone was signaling, not with a voice, not with a radio, with light. But there was no light outside, only fog. I leaned close to the window, straining to see. The fog pressed right up against the glass, blank and endless. Yet the sound pattern repeated again, 3 short, 1 long, like a desperate hand tapping on a door. My radio, my handheld, came alive again, but this time it wasn't my colleague. It was a woman's voice, thin and trembling, as if she'd been speaking for hours. Mayday, Mayday, can anyone hear me? I froze. The voice was modern, not flattened like the signalman's, not formal. It had the uneven tremor of real panic. I pressed transmit. Who is this? I asked. State your position. The woman's voice came back instantly, too fast. I don't know. Fog everywhere. The sea went quiet. I saw the lighthouse light and I followed it, and now I can't. She swallowed audibly. Please. It answered me. It told me to come closer. My blood went cold. It told you? I asked. The woman's breathing rasped through the radio. Yes, on the channel. The old channel. It said it could guide me. It said station protocol. Please, I can't see my own hands. I stared at the lens. The pale glow inside it pulsed faintly, matching the click below, like a heartbeat. The wall speaker behind me hissed again, and the signalman's voice returned, calm as ever. Incoming contact, it said. Respond. I swallowed. The 4 survival rules echoed through my head like a warning bell. Never go alone. Obtain permission. Take only photos. Reconnaissance. And now, a new pressure. Someone out there, in the fog, calling for help. If I responded, I'd be engaging, participating, becoming part of station protocol. If I didn't, then I'd be listening to a woman disappear. And that's when I realized the lighthouse wasn't just answering the radio. It was recruiting. I kept my finger off the transmit button for a full 2 seconds, forcing myself to use the pause the way I always do, like a hand on the brake before a blind turn. In those 2 seconds, my mind ran through the only thing that mattered. What keeps you alive? Not bravery, not curiosity, not compassion, even when it hurts. Rules. 4 rules, drilled into me by every close call I'd ever survived. Obtain permission, take nothing but photos, never go alone, always conduct reconnaissance. They weren't just professional ethics. They were boundaries, lines that tell a place what you are and what you are not. If I crossed them, I became something else. The woman's breathing crackled in my handheld, irregular and close, as if she were holding her radio to her lips. Somewhere beneath her breaths, I could hear a faint slosh, water against something solid. A boat hull? Rocks? A seawall? Please, she whispered. If you're real, say something. The signalman's voice came through the wall speaker at the same time, overlapping her panic with a calm authority. Respond. Two voices, two urgencies, two different worlds. I stepped back from the window, away from the fog, away from the feeling that something outside might be listening through the glass. I kept my voice low, controlled, and I pressed transmit. I hear you, I said. Stay where you are. Don't move toward the lighthouse. Silence for a beat. Then the woman's voice returned, sharper now. I can't. It told me to come closer. The light... She broke off, swallowing hard. The light is behind me now. I'm following it, I think. But every time I walk, it feels like the ground shifts, like I'm walking in circles. My skin prickled. Tell me your name, I said. A pause, like she had to remember what names were. Marin, she whispered. My name is Marin. Marin, I repeated slowly, anchoring it. Listen carefully. Do you see anything? Any shape? Any sound besides the fog? Her breath hitched. There's a bell. I heard it once, like a buoy bell, but it's too close. And then, she inhaled sharply, and then I heard someone on the radio, a man. He said station protocol. He said he could guide me home. The word home hit me harder than it should have, because it's what you say to someone lost. It's what you promise when you want them to follow you. Behind me, the wall speaker hissed again. Maintain protocol, the signalman said. Guide contact. Guide contact. I didn't like how the building used the same language it had used with me. Intent, protocol, authorized. It wasn't random. It was a system. And systems don't stop once they start. I kept my voice steady for Marin. What were you doing out there? Why are you on the water in this fog? She let out a small, broken laugh that sounded like pain. I'm not supposed to be on the water. I'm a sound recordist for a documentary, The Old Lighthouse. I came with a crew earlier this week, but today I came back alone. I wanted ambient audio, fog horns, waves, something pure. Her voice trembled, and then the fog rolled in so fast. I lost the shoreline. The GPS glitched. My phone died. The sea went quiet, and She stopped, and in the gap, I heard it. A low hum. Not from my handheld, not from the wind. From the lighthouse itself, beneath the floor, deep inside, like a generator turning over, trying to wake. Marin, I said, are you in a boat right now? Yes, she whispered. A small one, an inflatable. I can't hear the motor. It won't start. That was worse than being on foot. In fog, on water, with no engine, you drift. And drifting means the coast decides where you go. Do not follow any light you see, I said. Do you understand? She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was smaller. But it's the only thing I can see. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing my breathing to slow. If the lighthouse was projecting light through the fog, if it could do that, it could also lure. A beacon can guide you away just as easily as it guides you in. Behind me, the Fresnel lens pulsed again. Pale, patient, like it wanted someone to notice. I turned toward it, and for the first time since arriving, I spoke directly to the lighthouse, not to the radio. "I'm not taking over your station," I said quietly. "I'm not your operator." The air felt heavy for a moment. Then the wall speaker crackled. "Station requires operator," the signalman said. "Operator present." My throat tightened. "No," I said. "I'm a visitor." A pause. Static swelled, then dropped. "Intent recorded," the speaker replied. "Maintain protocol." The words weren't angry. They were indifferent, like gravity. I looked down at my handheld radio again. If Marin was real and she sounded real, then I had a choice. I could treat this like a paranormal phenomenon and retreat, protecting myself. Or I could treat it like a rescue, which meant engaging more deeply with whatever system had turned this lighthouse into a trap. Never go alone. I wasn't alone in the sense that my colleague waited nearby, but they couldn't see through the fog. They couldn't reach Marin on the water, and the lighthouse was actively cutting my communications. So I did the only thing that still felt like rule following. I asked permission again. Not from the agency, not from the law, from the place. "I'm going to help her," I said softly, voice barely above a whisper. "If I do this, you let me leave." The lens glow dimmed for a breath, then brightened again. The wall speaker hissed. "Authorized," the signalman said. I didn't like how quickly it answered, like it had been waiting for that sentence. I stepped back into the radio room. The amber indicator light still glowed. The old console sat there, dials frozen on a frequency I couldn't read clearly without getting close. I raised my camera again and filmed, narrating under my breath. Date, time, location, like I always do. Proof, evidence, an anchor for later when memory tries to rewrite itself. Then I did something I hadn't planned on doing when I came here. I sat down at the desk. The chair creaked, protesting, but it held my weight. The desk surface was dusty except for a clear oval where someone's forearms had rested recently. That detail made my stomach twist. I didn't touch the console yet. I hovered my hands above it, feeling the faint warmth rising from the metal, like a living thing. "Marin," I said into my handheld, "I'm going to try to guide you, but you have to do exactly what I say. No shortcuts." Her breath came fast. Okay. "Yes." I glanced at the old microphone hanging from its hook. It wasn't connected to my handheld. It belonged to the lighthouse. I remembered something from my reconnaissance. An old operator's manual scanned and archived. The lighthouse's call sign had once been used for navigation assistance during heavy weather. It wasn't just a light. It was a voice, a guide, a final human thread when the sea erased everything else. And now, that thread was still here. But the hands holding it might not be human anymore. I lifted my camera one more time and took a close-up of the console. Then, slowly, so slowly I could feel each second, I reached out and touched one of the metal knobs. It was warm, not room temperature. Warm like skin. The instant my fingers made contact, the humming beneath the floor surged. The wall speaker popped with a sharp burst of static, and the old radio set, silent a moment ago, came alive with a steady tone, like a carrier signal locking in. Marin gasped through my handheld. "It's louder now," she whispered. "The man, he's louder now." I swallowed. "Marin, listen to me, not him." But even as I said it, a new voice entered the room. Not through my handheld, not through the wall speaker, through the old microphone. It clicked on by itself, as if an unseen hand had pressed the switch. and the signalman's voice, now closer than ever, spoke directly into the radio room air. "Operator," it said, "begin guidance." For a moment, I didn't move. I held my breath without meaning to, listening for the boundary between sound and imagination. The old microphone had no business speaking into the room. It was a piece of metal on a hook. It should have been dead. But the word, operator, had been spoken with the weight of a title, like the Lighthouse had finally decided what I was. I forced air back into my lungs and let it out slowly. 1, 2, a controlled exhale, the kind that keeps your hands from shaking. I didn't answer the microphone. Instead, I spoke into my handheld radio, keeping my voice low and even. "Marin," I said, "tell me what you can hear." Her voice came back thin and jagged. "The bell again. She swallowed. "It's closer. And the man, he's saying numbers, coordinates, but they don't make sense. They're wrong. Like they're from a different map. Numbers, coordinates, station protocol." I looked down at the nautical charts on the wall. If those charts were old, mid-century, then the coordinates might not match modern GPS references. Coastal charts change, shorelines shift, beacons move. If Marin was hearing coordinates from decades ago and following them now, she could be walking, drifting, straight into rocks. I kept my hand on the knob lightly, not turning it yet. The warmth under my fingertips felt wrong, as if the metal was aware of my touch. The microphone clicked faintly again, like impatience. "Begin guidance," the signalman repeated. I ignored it. Not out of bravery, out of discipline. I wasn't going to let the Lighthouse set the pace. That was another rule I'd learned the hard way. If you let a place rush you, it controls you. I focused on Marin. "Describe what you see," I said, "even if it's just shapes." She breathed in, shaky. "Fog, white, but sometimes it thins for a second, and I see a dark line, like a wall, like something tall, a seawall, or the cliff base, or rocks." "Do you hear waves?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "That's the worst part. It's too quiet." Quiet sea and fog was unnatural. Even gentle water makes noise. Unless you're not on open water anymore. Unless you're inside a pocket, a cove, a hollow, a place sheltered from waves, or a place where sound is being swallowed. I glanced at the old logbook again, still on the lantern room desk, 1959 to 1963. A narrow slice of history, carefully preserved. I couldn't reach it from here without leaving the radio room, but I didn't need to. The Lighthouse itself was telling me what mattered. That time frame, that protocol, that voice. I had the sudden, sharp feeling that I wasn't speaking to a building. I was speaking to a routine, an old duty that had never ended. I lifted my camera and started recording again, not for drama, but for grounding. If something happened, I wanted my own voice documented in real time, calm and consistent, proof that I didn't panic, even if the place wanted me to. "Marin," I said, "listen carefully. I'm going to guide you using sound, not light. Turn your radio volume down until you can barely hear the man." She hesitated. "But do it," I said, firmer now. Not loud, just certain. A pause. I heard faint fumbling, the tiny scratch of fingers on plastic. "Okay," she whispered. "He's quieter." Good. If the Lighthouse needed her to obey, reducing its influence might break the chain. Now I needed something else, something the Lighthouse couldn't control completely. "Marin," I said, "do you have a whistle? A flare? Anything that makes noise?" No, she said quickly. Just my phone, and it's dead. Then use your voice, I said. I want you to shout once, just once. Tell me what happens. Does the sound come back to you? Any echo? She inhaled hard, then yelled, raw, scared. Hello! Her voice burst through the handheld, then died. And in the silence that followed, I heard something that made my scalp tighten. An echo came back, but it didn't sound like her. It was delayed by a fraction of a second, and it had the wrong shape, lower, stretched, like her word had been taken and pressed through something wet. Hello, it returned, distant, not quite matching her pitch. Marin's breathing turned ragged. Did you hear that? She whispered. Yes, I said, and forced myself not to say more. Because if I named it, if I admitted how wrong it was, I'd give it weight. I glanced at the console again. The old dials were set to a frequency line marked with tiny numbers. I leaned in just enough to read without fully committing my body. My eyes adjusted. The marking was faint but legible. 2182 kHz, the old international marine distress frequency, used for decades. A channel that carried panic, rescue, last words. My throat went tight. Of course the Lighthouse would use that. Of course it would live there, where lost voices gather. The microphone clicked again, louder this time. The voice came through it. No static now, no distance. Contact is drifting, the signalman said. Guide to station. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the knob slightly, just enough to change the receiver's sensitivity. The hum beneath the floor rose as if pleased. The amber indicator light brightened. The moment I adjusted it, a new layer of sound filled the room. Faint chatter beneath the static, like overlapping voices buried under waves. Too many to separate. Some sounded like men, some like women, some like children. All of them indistinct, murmuring in a rhythm that made my stomach curl. It sounded like a crowd trapped underwater. I stopped turning the knob. The murmuring didn't stop. Marin, I said, forcing my tone to stay calm. I need you to do something difficult. Turn your back to the light you see. Face the direction that feels darkest, she whispered. I can't tell. Pick one, I said. The Lighthouse wants you to look at it. Don't. A pause. I heard her breathing shift, like she'd turned her head. Okay, she said. I'm facing away. Good, I whispered. Now listen. Do you hear the bell still? She went silent for a long second. It's farther. It's like it moved, or like she moved out of its line. Now, I said, take 2 slow steps forward, then stop. Tell me what you feel under your feet. Her breaths came shallow. I heard a soft shuffle, then another. It's not water, she said, voice trembling. It's gritty, like sand. Sand meant shoreline, a chance. Good, I said. Stay there, don't keep walking. The microphone snapped. Operator, the signalman said sharply. Protocol requires contact be received. Received, like a package, like cargo. My hand tightened on the edge of the desk. I felt anger flare, quiet, controlled, but real. Not because I believed the Lighthouse was evil in a cartoon way, but because I understood systems. Systems don't care. Systems only function. And if this system's function was to receive lost people in fog, then Marine was being processed. I leaned closer to the microphone without touching it, keeping my voice low. I'm not receiving anyone, I said. I'm returning her. The room went still. Even the murmuring beneath the static seemed to pause, like the building was listening. Then the wall speaker hissed with a sound like air being sucked in. "Operator deviation detected," the signalman said. "Correct course." The hum surged again. The lantern room light pulsed brighter, visible even through the doorway, a pale heartbeat in the fog. And in my handheld, Marin suddenly gasped. "It's behind me again," she whispered. The light, it's behind me again, like it moved, like it's circling me. "Don't turn around," I said immediately. "Do not look at it." "I can feel it," she whispered, "like warmth on my neck. Warmth, just like the knob." I closed my eyes for half a second, thinking fast. If the lighthouse could shift its beacon, if it could relocate the sensation of light, then guiding Marin by avoiding it might not be enough. I needed to break the protocol itself. The protocol required logging, responding, keeping the light, receiving contact. So I did something reckless, but not random. A controlled violation. I reached for the hand crank generator on the floor. I didn't unplug anything. I didn't smash equipment. I wasn't going to anger the place with violence. Instead, I grabbed the generator handle and began to turn it, slow at first, then steady, feeding power into the system in a way it hadn't chosen. The hum wavered, the amber light flickered, the murmuring voices surged up, louder like a tide. My skin crawled as fragments became clear, half words, broken pleas, names spoken into static. And then the signalman's voice, no longer calm, cut through the room. "Stop," it said. I kept turning, because that was the moment I understood. The lighthouse didn't just answer the radio. It answered control. And I had just put my hand on the wheel. The crank handle fought me like it didn't want to turn. Not physically, metal is metal. But the resistance felt emotional. As if the room itself disliked the direction my hands were taking it. I kept my pace slow and even, no jerking, no sudden panic, just steady rotation like winding a clock. The amber indicator light flickered again, then steadied, but not the same steady as before. It pulsed, a little too rhythmic, like something had shifted from operational to alert. The murmuring under the static grew louder, swelling into a layered chorus that made it hard to think. Names, numbers, words like help and turn back and too late, bleeding together without clean edges. It felt less like listening to a radio and more like standing in a crowd where everyone was whispering into your ear at once. The signalman's voice came again, sharper now, stripped of that calm, bureaucratic tone. "Cease deviation." I didn't stop turning. My hands stayed firm, but my voice remained quiet. "Marin," I said into my handheld, "tell me what you feel right now, under your feet, in the air." Her breathing was fast and uneven. "The fog, it's moving like it's flowing around me, and the warmth." She swallowed. "It's gone. It's not on my neck anymore." "Good. Do you still see the light?" I asked. "No," she whispered, and the relief in her voice was immediate, like a knot loosening. It's dim. It's far." I kept turning the crank. The handle creaked softly. Each rotation made the hum beneath the floor shift, wobbling like an engine losing its preferred rhythm. I had the sense I was forcing the lighthouse to do something it hadn't done in a long time. Accept new input. A system built on repetition hates improvisation. The wall speaker hissed, then popped with a harsh burst of static that made me flinch despite myself. For a split second, the murmuring vanished, replaced by pure silence so complete my ears rang. Then the signalman spoke again, but it wasn't the same voice. It was still male, still flattened, but younger. Breathier, like someone speaking while running. "Fog's wrong," it said. "Fog's wrong. She's calling." The transmission cut out abruptly. I slowed the crank, letting the handle coast for half a rotation before I resumed. The amber light fluttered. The console was pulling in something older, not just the signalman's routine voice. Stray broadcasts, fragments, the lighthouse's past leaking into the present. I glanced at the charts pinned to the wall. My flashlight beam shook slightly, just a tremor in my wrist. I forced it to steady. The charts showed hazard points, tide notes, and a line that marked the safe channel into a small cove, an area that might offer calm water. If Maren was on sand now, that meant she was closer to shore than she realized. That was good, but in fog, shore can be a knife. Rocks, sudden drop-offs, currents that pull you sideways into cliffs. "Maren," I said, "I want you to sit down, right now." "What?" she whispered. "Sit," I repeated. "Lower your center of gravity. If the ground shifts, you don't want to fall." A pause. Then I heard fabric rustle through her mic. "Okay, I'm sitting." "Good," I said. "Now listen, I want you to take off one shoe." She made a small sound of confusion. "Why?" "So you can feel the ground better," I said. "Barefoot on sand tells you what direction the slope goes. Waterline has a pull. We use the world, not the light." She hesitated, then complied. "Okay, I can feel it. It's cold, damp." "Does it slope?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered. "Down to my right." Down to the right meant toward water or toward a channel. It depended where she was facing. My colleague was still out there somewhere beyond the ridge, blind in fog. I tried again on my handheld briefly. "Status check," I said. "If you hear me, key twice." Nothing. I swallowed. External communication compromised. The lighthouse wasn't lying about that, so I committed to the only threat I had, Maren's voice. "Maren," I said, "I want you to crawl, not walk. Crawl 5 steps uphill, opposite the slope. Count them out loud." Her breathing shivered. "Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Stop," I said. "Do you feel anything different? Rocks, grass, anything not sand?" A pause. There's something hard, like wood." "Wood." I stared at the charts again. There had once been a small landing jetty on the north side. Old, mostly collapsed, but still partially in place according to a fisherman I'd interviewed. If Maren had drifted near it, she could be close to the cliff path that led to the lighthouse. But why would the lighthouse lure her toward a jetty, unless it wanted her to reach the structure, to be received? The microphone in the room clicked again, and the signalman's original voice returned, colder now, less patient. "Operator," it said, "contact must approach station." I kept turning the crank with one hand and spoke quietly with the other hand holding my handheld. "Maren," I said, "do you hear the man still?" She went silent for a moment, listening. "Yes," she whispered, "but he's broken, like he's far away, like he's underwater." "Good," I said. "Don't answer him." A soft, almost inaudible sound came through her channel then, like a second voice, not speaking, just breathing. Too close to her mic to be anything but near her. My stomach clenched. "Maren," I said softly, "are you alone?" She didn't answer right away. Her breath caught. I think so." "Don't think," I said. "Listen. Do you hear footsteps? Do you hear anything moving that isn't you?" A long pause, and then very faintly, I heard it too through her microphone. A slow, wet scrape, as if something was being dragged across sand. Maren's voice cracked. "It's behind me." I kept my tone controlled. "Don't turn," I said. "Keep your face forward. Put your hand on the wood. Tell me what it feels like." Her breathing became ragged. "It's old, splintered." "Good," I said. "Hold on to it. Stay low." The scrape sound grew closer. 1, 2, then a pause like it stopped to listen. The murmuring in my radio room surged again, as if excited. And then, through Marin's channel, came a different sound. A bell, not distant, not faint. Close enough that it vibrated the microphone, making the audio warp. Marin whimpered. "It's right here, it's like it's inside my head." I clenched my jaw. Fog bells aren't supposed to be inside your head. They're supposed to be out at sea, fixed to buoys, ringing with wave motion. But this bell sounded intentional, like someone was ringing it. I turned the crank faster, still controlled, but firmer. The amber light on the console flashed rapidly. The hum beneath the floor rose into a higher pitch, and for a second, the murmuring voices snapped into clarity. A single phrase repeated over and over in different voices. "Come closer. Come closer. Come closer." My skin crawled. It wasn't Marin's voice. It wasn't the signalman. It was a chorus. I leaned closer to my handheld, lowering my voice into a whisper, the way you do when you don't want something else to hear. "Marin," I said, "when I say now, you are going to crawl along the wood. Keep one hand on it at all times. Do not look back. Do not respond to any voice except mine." Her breath shook. "Okay. Now," I said. I heard her move. Small shuffles on sand, the scrape of her palm on rough wood. The dragging sound behind her followed, slow, wet, patient. Like it knew she couldn't run. The bell rang again, closer still, and then through Marin's mic I heard words that weren't coming from her radio speaker. They came from the fog itself. A man's voice right beside her, low and calm. "Station protocol," it said. "Operator will receive you." Marin made a small, choking sound. "It's here," she whispered. "It's right next to me." I forced my voice to stay steady. "Keep moving," I said. "Don't answer." In the radio room, the microphone clicked hard, like anger. "Operator," the signalman barked. "Correct course." I didn't stop turning, because I could feel it now, in my bones. The lighthouse wasn't guiding Marin to safety. It was guiding her to compliance. And if I let the protocol run, it would end the only way it knew how. By taking her. My arms were starting to burn from the crank, a dull ache spreading from my wrists up into my shoulders. I welcomed the pain. Pain was grounding. Pain reminded me I still had a body, still had weight in the world. Whatever this lighthouse was, whatever system it had become, it still needed something from me. Motion, compliance, energy. I gave it the wrong kind on purpose. I slowed the crank suddenly, then reversed direction. The handle resisted, then jerked, metal shrieking softly, as if it hadn't been turned that way in years. The amber indicator light flared bright, then dimmed to a sickly orange. The hum beneath the floor stuttered, like an engine misfiring. The murmuring voices erupted into chaos, overlapping, panicked, no longer synchronized. The microphone screamed with feedback. "Operator error!" the signalman's voice snapped, distorted now, stretched thin. "Correct. Correct." The transmission fractured into static. "Marin," I whispered urgently, "tell me what just happened." Her voice came back breathless, shocked. "The bell!" It stopped. Everything stopped for a second. "Good. Systems hate interruption." "Keep moving," I said. "Slow, steady, one hand on the wood. I'm at the end, she whispered. There's something vertical, like steps. I can feel them with my knee. Steps. If she'd reached the base of the cliff path, if those were the old, uneven stone steps that climbed up toward the lighthouse, then she was dangerously close. Not just to safety, to the source. Do not climb, I said immediately. Do not go up. But, she started, voice breaking. Listen to me, I said, firmer now. The lighthouse wants you inside. The steps go there. You stay where you are. Behind her breathing, I heard it again. The slow scrape, closer now, dragging over sand and wood. Not fast, never rushed, like it knew time was on its side. Maren whimpered. It's still here, I swallowed, my mouth dry. Describe it, without turning. A pause. Her voice dropped to a terrified whisper. It's cold. I can feel cold where it is. Like the air changes, cold like the metal, cold like the walls, cold like a place that doesn't need blood anymore. I cranked harder, then abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was violent. No hum, no murmuring, no wind, no foghorn. Even Maren's breathing dropped out for a fraction of a second, like the world itself had skipped a beat. Then everything came back at once. The lantern room light surged so bright it bled through the radio room doorway, casting fractured prisms across the walls. The amber indicator light went solid, brighter than before. The console emitted a high-pitched whine that drilled into my skull, and the microphone spoke, not in the signalman's voice, in many voices. Operator present. Operator confirmed. Operator required. I staggered back from the desk, heart hammering. For the first time since entering the lighthouse, fear spiked hot and sharp instead of cold and controlled. This wasn't negotiation anymore. It was escalation. Maren, I said quickly, I need you to move away from the steps, back toward the sand. I can't, she sobbed. It's blocking me. Blocking you how? I demanded. Her voice shook violently. It's not solid, but I can't go through it. It feels like pressure, like walking into deep water. My skin prickled. Whatever followed the protocol didn't need a body the way we do. It just needed to occupy space. The wall speaker crackled again, voice cold and clipped. Contact received, the signalman said. Begin intake. No, I said out loud, without thinking. The word echoed strangely in the room, like it had hit something and come back wrong. I grabbed my handheld radio with both hands. Maren, listen to me. You are going to do something that feels wrong. She was crying now, small, broken sounds. Okay. You're going to move toward the water, I said. Not the steps, the opposite direction, toward the slope. What? She cried. I'll drown. Not if you stay low, I said. Crawl. Let the water touch your feet, but not your chest. The lighthouse doesn't want the sea. It can't control it the same way. I didn't know if that was true. But the lighthouse had been built to fight the sea, to tame it with light and order. Systems fear what they can't categorize. Maren hesitated. I could hear the thing near her shift, an invisible pressure adjusting. Hurry, I whispered, before it decides for you. She sobbed once. Then I heard movement, sand scraping, fabric dragging, a splash, small but real. I'm in the water, she gasped. It's cold. The dragging sound behind her changed abruptly, turning wet and agitated, like something moving where it didn't belong. The microphone shrieked. Operator, the signalman barked. Correct course immediately. I ignored it. Stay low, I said to Maren. Move sideways along the waterline. Let the waves guide you. Her breathing turned ragged, but determined. Okay. The lantern room light pulsed violently now. Flashes of brightness stabbing through the fog. The hum beneath the floor returned in erratic bursts, like a heart in arrhythmia. I turned the crank again, fast, reckless now, no longer caring about smoothness. The handle bucked, metal biting into my palm. Pain flared, blood smeared the grip. The murmuring voices screamed. Through Marin's channel, I heard a sound that made my stomach drop. A splash, not hers. Something else had entered the water. Marin screamed. "It's in the water! It's pulling!" "Hold the ground," I shouted. "Dig your fingers in." The radio room shook, actually shook, as if a deep wave had struck the lighthouse foundation. Dust rained from the ceiling. The lantern room light flickered, then went dark for a split second. In that darkness, the murmuring voices cut off completely. Marin's scream turned into coughing, choking gasps. It let go," she sobbed. "It let go." "Keep moving," I said, voice hoarse now. "Do not stop." I leaned hard into the crank, muscles screaming, blood slick on metal. The console sparked, tiny blue arcs snapping across the dials. The amber indicator light shattered with a sharp pop, plunging the radio room into dim flashlight glow. The microphone fell from its hook and hit the desk with a hollow clatter. Silence followed. Real silence. No hum, no voices, no wind. Just my own breathing, loud and uneven. "Marin?" I whispered. Her voice came back weak but alive. I'm clear. I found rocks, big ones. I can hide here." Relief hit me so hard my knees nearly gave out. "Stay there," I said. "Do not move until daylight." "I won't," she whispered. "I swear." I sank down against the wall, shaking now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. My hands throbbed, my ears rang. In the lantern room, the lens was dark, truly dark. The lighthouse felt empty, not abandoned, vacant. As if something had stepped out briefly and wasn't sure whether to return. For a long time, I stayed pressed against the radio room wall, listening to the kind of quiet you only get when something has stopped trying. My flashlight beam lay across the dead console, catching dust motes that drifted like slow snow. The hand-crank generator sat in front of me, handle slick with my blood, as innocent as any tool, until you remember what it was connected to. My handheld radio rested in my lap. Marin's breathing came through it faintly, intermittent, proof that the world outside still had lungs. "Marin," I said softly, "tell me you're still there." A pause, then her whisper. "I'm here. I'm under the rocks. I can't see anything, but I can feel the waves. Waves, normal waves, the sound of a world that didn't follow station protocol." "Good," I said. "Stay low. Don't use your light unless you have to. If you hear any voice that isn't mine, don't answer." "I won't," she promised. Her voice sounded smaller now, like shock had finally drained her. "What? What was that?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I wanted mystery, because any explanation would be a guess. And guessing in places like this is how you end up lying to yourself. I preferred truth, even when it was incomplete. "I don't know," I admitted quietly. "But it wanted you close. It wanted you to come up the steps." Marin's breath shivered. It sounded so official, like a job. I closed my eyes. "That's the point," I whispered. "Jobs don't feel like danger. They feel like procedure." Outside the radio room, the lighthouse remained unnaturally still. The wind had returned, but it was gentle now, sliding past broken windows instead of howling through them. The lantern room lens was dark, no pulse, no glow. The fog pressed against the glass, but without that earlier sense of intelligence, more like weather again. Still, I didn't trust it. In my head, the 4 forbidden rules repeated like prayer beads. Permission, photos only, never alone, reconnaissance. The worst part was realizing how close I'd come to breaking all of them at once. I'd asked permission, yes, but then I'd accepted a new role, operator. I'd sat at the desk, I'd turned the knob, I'd cranked the generator, I'd engaged. And the moment I engaged, the lighthouse tried to expand the boundary of what was authorized. That's how it worked. Not with claws, not with a monster in the corner, with paperwork language and calm voices, with protocol. I stood up slowly, testing my balance. My legs felt stiff, like I'd been crouched for hours instead of minutes. I took a step toward the lantern room door and paused at the threshold. The air changed again, cooler, saltier, less thick than the radio room. I looked through the window. Nothing, just fog. But as I watched, a faint shape moved in it, far out, low on the horizon. Not a person, not a boat. More like a shadow slipping sideways, as if the fog had layers and something was traveling between them. My throat tightened. "Marin," I whispered into my handheld. "Do you see anything? Any light?" "No," she said quickly. "Just dark and water." "Good," I said. "Keep it that way." I turned away from the windows and focused on leaving. The moment things go quiet in a haunted place, people assume it's over. That's when they relax. That's when they trip on a loose board, make a careless sound, pick up a souvenir, or decide to explore just a little deeper. That's when places take advantage. I gathered myself, then moved with deliberate slowness, down the spiral stairs, one step at a time. My flashlight stayed pointed ahead, not sweeping wildly. I didn't want to look like prey. Halfway down, the carved symbols along the walls seemed darker than before, as if moisture had filled them. I didn't touch them. I didn't even stop for close-ups. Photos only, yes, but I already had enough. The lighthouse didn't need more of my attention. Still, as I descended, my handheld radio emitted a faint hiss that didn't match Marin's breathing. A soft carrier tone, the kind you hear right before someone speaks. I stopped on the stairs. "Marin?" I whispered. Silence. Then, very faintly, a male voice tried to form through static. "Operator!" It was weaker now, like a dying signal. But the fact it was still there made my skin crawl. I didn't answer it. I pressed transmit, not to reply, but to overwrite. "Marin," I said, louder than before. "Stay hidden. I'm leaving the lighthouse now. Do you copy?" Her voice came back immediately, grounding. "I copy." The static voice faded under her words, as if it couldn't compete with something living. I kept descending. At the base level, the metal gate stood open, the same way I'd found it. Fog had reached the cliff path, turning the world into a narrow corridor of visibility. Just my boots, my hands, the beam of my flashlight, and the sound of my own breathing. I made it to the outside ridge where my colleague's vehicle should have been, and my heart sank when I saw nothing but a vague outline. Headlights off, shape blurred. I moved toward it, cautious. Then my colleague's voice emerged from the fog, real and sharp. "Where have you been?" they demanded, voice shaking. "Your radio went dead." I tried to get closer in the fog. They stopped, swallowing hard. "I thought I lost you." "I'm here," I said, keeping my tone steady. "We have someone on the shoreline, a woman, named Marin. She's alive." My colleague stared at me, face pale in the flashlight glow. How? There's no signal out there. I couldn't raise anyone. I know, I said softly. But the lighthouse could. We moved fast then, guided by instinct and the faintest memory of the coastline layout. We didn't go to the steps. We didn't go near the lighthouse. We went wide, following the safer ground, shouting Marin's name into the fog. It took time, too much time. But eventually, a weak voice answered from the rocks. "Here," she whispered. When we found her, she looked like someone pulled from a nightmare. Skin cold, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes wide and unfocused. She clutched her dead phone like a talisman. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared past us, toward where the lighthouse should have been, like she expected it to speak again. As we helped her to her feet, my handheld radio hissed softly one last time, and in the background, buried under the sound of waves, I heard a calm voice whisper a final instruction, so faint I couldn't be sure it was real. "Maintain protocol." The fog didn't lift like a curtain. It thinned the way exhaustion leaves the body, slowly, reluctantly, in uneven breaths. By the time the first gray hint of morning seeped into the sky, Marin was wrapped in a blanket in the back seat, shivering so hard her teeth clicked. My colleague drove with both hands tight on the wheel, eyes fixed forward as if looking away from the road might invite the coast to rearrange itself again. I sat in the passenger seat with my handheld radio resting on my thigh, volume low. I told myself it was for safety, for any final communication, any call for help, any confirmation from authorities once we reached coverage. But the truth was simpler. I was listening to make sure the lighthouse didn't follow. The sea and daylight looked ordinary, cold, steel gray, restless. The cliff road wound along it like nothing had happened. That normalcy felt wrong. It made the night's events feel like a fever dream, until Marin spoke behind me in a voice that was too raw to be imagined. "It wasn't just a voice," she said quietly. I twisted in my seat, careful not to startle her. "Tell me what you remember," I said, slow and calm. Marin stared out the window at passing scrub and rock. Her eyes looked older than they had the night before, like she'd spent years listening to something she couldn't forget. When it told me to come closer, it didn't sound like a man on a radio anymore. It sounded like it was inside the fog, like the fog had a mouth. She swallowed. And when I didn't move fast enough, I felt it get impatient. My colleague's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. "How does fog get impatient?" they muttered, not quite asking. Marin didn't react. "It used my own thoughts," she whispered. "It used my reasons. It sounded like my boss. It sounded like my dad. It sounded like me. Like the part of me that wanted to believe there was a simple solution." I felt the cold settle deeper in my chest. That was what I'd been trying not to say out loud. Systems don't just give orders. They learn what you'll obey. I looked down at my hands. My palm was wrapped in a strip of gauze torn from my kit, already stained through with blood. The crank handle had bitten deep. It should have hurt more. But pain was honest. Pain didn't lie to get you closer. A few kilometers later, the radio hissed softly. Not a full crackle, not a voice. Just a faint, steady carrier tone. Like an open line waiting for someone to speak. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. Still, the hairs on my arms lifted. My colleague noticed it too, glancing at my radio without moving their head, like they didn't want to give it the satisfaction. "We need to report this," they said, voice tight. The woman, the lighthouse, all of it. I didn't answer right away. Reporting implies there's a box for it, a form, a procedure, a protocol. And I had just watched what protocol could become. We'll get her safe first, I said finally. We drove until we hit a small coastal town where the fog was thinner, the air warmer, and the world seemed to remember what daylight was for. We pulled into a clinic parking lot as the morning truly began. Birds in the trees, a dog barking somewhere, the normal noise of life returning like it had never left. Inside, nurses took Maren quickly. Questions came fast. Name, age, allergies, what happened? Maren answered what she could, but she kept looking over her shoulder as if she expected someone in a uniform to arrive and ask her to sign something. A few hours later, when she'd warmed up and her hands stopped shaking, a local officer took a statement. My colleague gave the safe version: fog, equipment failure, disorientation, rescue. No mention of voices, no mention of the radio room, no mention of the word operator hanging in the air like a title. The officer nodded, wrote it down, and let us go with a warning about the coast being dangerous in winter. He was kind. He meant well. And he couldn't have understood if we'd tried. Outside the clinic, I stood alone beside the vehicle, breathing in the scent of morning. Coffee from a nearby cafe, damp asphalt, distant salt. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt a quiet, persistent unease, like a bruise you only notice when you stop moving. My handheld radio sat in my jacket pocket. I told myself I'd turn it off. I told myself I'd remove the batteries, wrap it in foil, drop it in a river if I had to. But I didn't. Because another part of me, the part that makes a living exploring places like that, wanted to know if the lighthouse would call again. That curiosity is its own kind of danger. And that's when things took a darker turn. 2 days later, after Maren was discharged and safely home with her crew, I returned to the area in daylight with my colleague. We didn't go to the lighthouse. We stayed on a public overlook with binoculars and a long lens camera. The safest kind of distance. Observation without intrusion. The lighthouse stood on its cliff like a broken tooth. In full sun, it looked harmless, just a ruin, a tourist's curiosity. But the fog clung to it even when the rest of the coastline was clear. A thin halo of haze around the tower, refusing to disperse. I took photos, wide, close, zoomed in on the lantern room windows. In one frame, I caught a pale smudge inside the glass, like something reflecting light from within. My colleague leaned close to the camera screen. That could be glare, they said. Could be, I agreed. But I knew glare didn't pulse. We stayed for an hour, then left. We had done what the rules demanded. Reconnaissance, permission through distance, no interference. And yet, as we drove away, my handheld radio, powered off, made a sound. Not static. Not a voice. A single sharp click, like a switch being thrown. I pulled it from my pocket, staring. The screen was dark. The power button wasn't stuck. The batteries hadn't moved. My colleague's eyes met mine, and for the first time since that night, I saw real fear in them. That's impossible, they whispered. I didn't answer. I just held the radio in my hand, feeling the same faint warmth I'd felt on the console knob, the same wrong skin temperature heat in dead metal. That evening, back in my motel room, I laid the radio on the table and didn't touch it again. I showered, ate a meal I barely tasted, and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard the bell. Not outside, not in the distance, inside my head. Near midnight, The radio hissed. I opened my eyes instantly. The room was dark except for the digital clock's faint green numbers. 12:07. The radio sat on the table untouched. The hiss continued, steady, like the ocean in a shell. Then, softly, a voice emerged. No longer clipped, no longer official. It sounded tired, older, like a man who had been speaking into fog for a lifetime. "Operator," it said. I didn't move. I didn't reach for it. I let the silence stretch, the way you do when someone on the other end is testing whether you'll respond. The voice came again, gentler now, almost pleading. "Station requires relief. Relief, not rescue, not help. Relief, like a shift change, like a job that never ends unless someone takes over." My throat tightened. The Lighthouse wasn't calling Moraine. It wasn't calling my colleague. It was calling me because I had touched the system. I had turned the crank. I had answered the contact. In its mind, I had assumed duty. I spoke aloud into the darkness, not into the radio. "I'm not your relief," I said quietly. "I'm leaving." The radio hissed louder for a moment. Then the voice, now colder, returned to its earlier tone. "Maintain protocol." The hiss cut out abruptly, leaving dead silence so sharp it felt like pressure in my ears. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and stared at the radio until dawn. Nothing else happened. No further transmissions. No more clicks. But the next morning, when I checked the local news on my phone, my stomach dropped. The fisherman had reported hearing the Lighthouse call sign on the distress frequency during the night, clear as day, answering someone who wasn't there. The report was treated as interference, a curiosity, a harmless glitch. But I recognized the phrasing. "Station is operational. State your intent." And the line that chilled me most, because it was new. Operator on duty. I hadn't been back to the Lighthouse. I hadn't touched the console. I hadn't turned the crank. Yet somewhere on that coast, the old station was still speaking, still logging, still answering. And if it had decided I was the operator, then it might not need my hands anymore. I left the area that day. I drove inland until the air lost its salt and the wind lost its ocean edge. I told myself distance was protection. I told myself the signal couldn't follow me once I left the coast. But every so often, only in quiet rooms, only when my guard drops, I hear a faint hiss in my handheld radio, even when it's powered off. And sometimes, if I hold my breath and listen long enough, I can almost make out the calm, patient voice beneath it, waiting, recording, calling for relief. Because the Lighthouse doesn't just answer the radio. It answers whoever touched its protocol and lived. And now, when I plan my next exploration, my next abandoned place, my next haunted site, I find myself checking the coastlines on the map first. Not to go back, to make sure I'm nowhere near a signal that still believes it has a job. Take care of yourselves out there. Move slow. Stay steady. Ask permission. Always. Take nothing but photos. Never go alone. And do your reconnaissance like your life depends on it. Because sometimes it does. If you want to hear the next story, where I went after I swore I'd avoid the sea, subscribe to Real Life Stories and follow the channel. Stay close, but not too close. Good night, and be safe.